Okay, so let's have a look at some of the phrases that you've used. Let's start with these ones at the beginning. These phrases in the present age more and more, and this relative clause here, which has caused much discussion revolving around this issue. Even this bit about both advantages and disadvantages, they are what you call stock phrases or rote language. It is There's a category in the IELTS called memorization, and if the marker thinks that you have memorized chunks of language and you're producing them in your essay, even though they don't relate to the topic of the essay, then you will actually lose marks for this kind of language. I strongly recommend you don't use in the present age or more and more especially. Those two are very, very, very common stock phrases that almost everybody uses. I would cut those for sure. This one may lose you some marks, but it might be alright. So I'd recommend something much more direct, something much more related to the topic, obviously related to the topic. So make sure that you're answering the question. Unfortunately, I don't have the question to hand, so I'm not sure what question you're answering. But if it's about interracial marriages, start by talking about interracial marriages. Don't bother within the present age or nothing becoming more and more common. What does the question actually ask? And directly relate your introduction to that topic. Next, we have some grammar. This word arise, it may arise some interesting, what you actually want there is the word raise. It may raise some interesting or even challenging issues. You don't use arise in this way, which could be fairly helpful to remain the freshness. I think what you mean to say is to keep. But you're trying to use a more complicated word, but actually the word remain doesn't work in this context. The word keep does, so stick with keep. Keep the freshness of a relationship. Children of international couples could be more good-looking. Now this is a very interesting thing. What makes you think this? This seems a bit odd. An odd statement, and that they could be more talented. Where's your logic? Where's your thinking here? So with a statement like this, you'd have to explain it. You'd have to explain why you think good-looking and more talented comes with being interracial couples. It does seems a little odd to make. I mean, you may have a good reason for thinking this, but you haven't explained it, so an explanation is required there. Nextly, admittedly, yeah, we cannot ignore. These are bad English phrases. You've learned something here that you really is incorrect English. You shouldn't use this. So maybe something more like, on the other hand, this and this are contrasting, right? We have a contrasting with the negative and then positives here, so we want on the other hand, however, something like that. The variety of defects. Defects is the wrong word. Stick with something like the variety of problems, issues. The word defect, you're trying to use a more interesting, complicated word, but unfortunately you don't understand that word completely, and it's not right in this context. So stick with something simpler. Firstly, the cultural gap usually implies not being able to share another's humour. Implies, this is not really, again, it's a complicated word that you kind of know the meaning of, but again, you don't really know the meaning of it, and it's being used incorrectly here. So, and usually, be careful the way that you say these things. If you say things like people who get up in the morning usually get run over by cars, that just doesn't logically make sense. What makes you think that people who get up early in the morning usually die? It's not true. You're just using the word usually for no particular reason, and here there's the same kind of thing. It's that what makes you think it's usually true that people don't share each other's humor when they're intercultural? That's not. There's no evidence, no reason to think that. So the word usually is being used incorrectly. So perhaps just cut that word, and instead of implies, cultural gap might suggest or might result in not being able to share each other's humour. That's fair enough. It might do. Not usually, but it might do. Which I agree is one of the why are you agreeing here? So just cut that. Just cut that. I agree. Why are you agreeing? You're not required to agree. As far as I know, I don't know the question, but generally speaking, you want to avoid a word like I agree. In my opinion, perhaps that would be much better if that's what you're required to do by the question. Perhaps, in my opinion, which in my opinion is one of the main foundations, that would be better. I agree is too informal and not very good phrase. Here we have live styles. It should be life styles, L-I-F-E, not L-I-V-E. Prejudices and discriminations are both uncountable. It should be prejudice and discrimination. And to finish off, we've got the conclusion, which begins with a wrong phrase. To summary is not a correct phrase. You must learn some good phrases that actually are correct. So in conclusion, to sum up, these are correct phrases. To summary is made up, it doesn't exist, it's not good English. In spite of advantages and disadvantages, what's missing there? To summarize, in summary, in spite of the advantages and disadvantages, these disadvantages and advantages above, I believe that true love, trust and support, respect are important to lead a cross-cultural marriage to success. Now, my problem with this is that it seems completely unrelated to the beginning of your essay. The beginning of your essay seems to be talking about whether or not a intermarriage between different cultures cannot be successful, and you're saying, well, in my opinion, basically it is successful. But here you're talking about something completely different. You're talking about whether or not, these things, true love, trust and support. This is not what you've talked about in the body of the essay at all. So I suspect what's happened here is you've completely wandered off the topic of the question. So you know the question, I don't. But either this conclusion is wrong or your whole essay is wrong, one or the other, because they don't match. So make sure that your conclusion matches your body and it answers the question that you've been asked. And that's it.